Do you think that Putin has committed a war crime?
It's not a belief. It's a question of a longer judicial procedure, which is going to establish if someone is guilty or not guilty.
I don't understand why that isn't a simple yes.
Because it's not a matter of opinion what happens on the,
He's
if
invaded
you wanted
a country.
Yes, but starting the war itself is not a war crime. Let's talk proper historical language of war has always been around.
Well, we're joined in the studio now by Zultan Kovage, who is Hungary's State Secretary for International Communications and Relations, very close to Viktor Orbán, and I suppose we could call you the Information Minister.
That would be a little bit of exaggeration because we have a slightly more structured format, helping the Prime Minister and the government for the past 15 years. But indeed, my primary responsibility is, if you like, translating and transmitting the decisions, the standpoints, the opinion of the Hungarian government.
And you've worked at his side for what, 15 years?
That's right, right from 2010.
Yeah.
So I wonder whether we can start with kind of events this weekend, the moves towards peace in Ukraine, and Volodymyr Zelensky is now offering to meet Vladimir Putin in Istanbul on Thursday. First chance for direct peace talks. Do you think we're closer to an end of the conflict?
We hope so. Look, the nature of the conflict, as we have always suggested, and the Prime Minister was very outspoken about that, the longer it lasts, the more difficult it is to get out. So that's why right from the first moment of the war, actually, as a matter of fact, before that, because you could see it coming, you like it or not, 3 years ago, we have maintained that this war could have been prevented, and it should be stopped as soon as possible. That was the very first reaction of the government, with a very special reflection on the last Hungarian elections, because it was in the midst of the election campaigns, and we have a very strong mandate actually for peace. So the Hungarian standpoint, the Hungarian government's standpoint, is not a voluntary standpoint. It's something that's mandated, very strongly mandated.
You have good relations with Moscow. If Vladimir Putin doesn't go on Thursday to these talks, doesn't it show that he's not really serious about peace?
Well, I can tell you that one thing is for sure, and there's a lesson we have learned and we are learning as this war looms on for too long, and that is ultimatums should be stopped here. So there's no place for ultimatums from whichever side it is coming, because coming back to normal first requires establishing communication channels. I'm not sure that it's going to happen immediately right at the top of the hierarchy. The nature of peace talk, to best of my knowledge, I'm a historian, is always more gradual. But certainly, if a regular meeting and a high-level meeting of the Ukrainian and Russian sides can happen again, that has been terminated back, if I'm right, in April, May 22, that would be the best sign actually Europe can have at this moment.
But if Europe wants to kind of try to force the pace on this, and America has tried to force the pace on this equally, if Vladimir Putin doesn't go, the EU has said there should be sanctions on Russia. Would you join a call for those further sanctions?
I mean, the European Union is preparing the 17th sanction package. Do you believe it was effective? Because we don't believe it was effective. I mean, it's a long story. It's been on.
So Europe should have done nothing about the.
No. It's not, and that's not the point. Not the point, because sanctions are not the way you talk to someone. The way is keep communication channels open, and try to be as outspoken, honest, and consequential as possible. And then that might be helpful. I mean, take a look at for the past 2.5 years. Nobody talked to the president, to President Putin directly on behalf of the Western European powers. And that's a problem. So how do you expect...
he had broken international law.
Again, trying to set up a tribunal and claim that starting a war itself is a war crime, I believe is not the path that is going to help to sort
Well,
out
part
this.
of the UN Charter is
Yes, yes. We
sovereign
but
country.
hang on for a second and think about some European powers for the past couple of decades actually starting wars without, say, UN resolutions and so on. So that's in politics. You always have to be very careful about how you address the opposite side. It's not about like or dislike, but definitely the approach, which is condemning, not simply condemning, but treating the other side as a war criminal, is not going to be helpful in this process. It is not trying to forget what the Russians did. It is not about forgetting who committed the first act of war, but it is common sense actually. If you wanted to have a deal, if you wanted to cut some kind of understanding between the warring fractions, between those who are affected, you need to talk to each other. And re-establishing trust is not going to be easy.
Zoltán, let's dig down to the relationship that Hungary has right now. Do you believe in the sovereign territory of Ukraine? Do you believe that Ukraine is a country?
This is a starting point for everyone, and I believe if it's Hungary and the Hungarians, the Prime Minister, again, long before the war actually, but certainly when Russia invaded Ukraine, we have always maintained that it's a must for Hungary, primary interest of Hungary, that we have something in between us and the Russians. That was the plain formula the Prime Minister put it.
That's not the same thing as recognising Ukraine as
That
a
is the
sovereign
same
territory.
thing because that country is and was Ukraine. But reality on the ground, obviously, is slightly different now. Larger portions of Ukraine have been occupied for claims actually you can have a debate with, but certainly the state of war, the developments for the past couple of months, maybe year, are not showing towards the Ukrainians. But the thing is, sticking to territorial integrity, yes, it is a starting point, but reality on the ground probably is going to overwrite it. You have to have that recognition, because territorial integrity is a must when you have your principles actually laid or put on the table.
I'm just surprised that when Emily asked the question, do you believe in Ukraine's territorial integrity, you didn't just say yes.
Yeah, I did say yes. I did say yes, that we take Ukraine as it was before the war.
Do you think
and this
that
is
Putin
reality
has
now
committed a
as
war
it
crime?
stands now? Pardon me?
Do you think that Putin has committed a war crime?
It's not a belief. It's a question of a longer judicial procedure, which is going to establish if someone is guilty or not guilty.
I don't understand why that isn't a simple yes.
Because it's not a matter of opinion what happens on the,
He's invaded
if you wanted
a country.
Yes, but starting the war itself is not a war crime. Let's talk proper historical language of war has always been around. You like it or not.
Starting a war by invading somebody else's country.
Starting a war by invading someone, it's been part of history for thousands of years and probably is going to remain part of it. Starting a war itself is not a war crime. Atrocities committed during the conflict is another question, and then you need a tribunal, you need established truth on the ground. And
from what you've read about what's happened in places like Bucha.
Yes, but again, neither you nor me have primary information and reliable and final information on what happened. So I don't believe this conversation is going to be about establishing what happened in Bucha.
Let's go back to first principles, though, which is that the EU thinks that Putin has enacted an atrocity by invading Ukraine.
That's right.
Hungary doesn't.
Doesn't what?
I'm asking. Do you think that was an atrocity to invade Ukraine?
But take a look at all those elements of European, international, NATO declarations we've been voting together with our allies and confederates. Hungary has always been outspoken about the nature of this conflict.
No, not the nature of it, the fact that he invaded. Because the question really is why Hungary hasn't seen eye to eye. That's what we're trying to understand. Why hasn't Hungary seen eye to eye with the EU, who has outright condemned Putin and who has then followed that up with sanctions?
We don't do that on a daily basis because it's not an ideological issue for us. It's a matter of fact. You can talk about this fact on a daily basis, but it will, put you into a sequence of thinking which is not going to help to calm down, have a meaningful and rational, as much as possible, rational conversation.
Well, let's talk about
the
the Hungarian spy network that Ukraine says it's uncovered. working in the border region, they think that your government was trying to obtain defence secrets in Zaporizhia.
You see, this is another element of those half-truth elements of information with which, say, one warring party, namely Ukraine, has been using against even its own allies. Let's put it that way, because Hungary, if there's a description, is certainly helping Ukraine for the past 3 years during the war. This is the biggest humanitarian effort.
Say that, then?
Because nobody ever talks about the level, the quality of help Hungary has been providing for Ukraine for the past 3 years. Nobody ever talks about
because
that.
They think that
we have always been blamed actually for being pro-Russian and not coming together with the European and NATO standards. This is simply not true. This is simply not true. And again, if you see
talking Ukraine as calling Ukraine an ally, you think of Ukraine as an ally.
In that respect, that we were helping Ukraine for the past 3 years by all meaningful humanitarian elements possible on the ground, in that respect, we are an ally. And we are not being thanked for that. The very attitude of Ukraine towards Hungary from the very beginning of this war is close to hostile, let's put it that way. And when you see fragments of information coming about what is happening in the Carpatho Ukrainian part of Ukraine, which traditionally, actually, historically, let's put it that way, have been part of the Hungarian kingdom back more than 100 years ago. We have over 100,000 Hungarians, ethnic Hungarians, living there for historical reasons.
Do you think that should still be Hungary?
Pardon me?
Do you think that should still be Hungary?
No, that's not the point I'm trying to say.
Do you recognise that as Ukrainian land?
No, of course, and obviously. I mean, we can live
because
together.
they think that you're planning an incursion. This is what Ukraine says with the spying.
But we are in the midst of the war. And don't try to pretend and don't try to presume that it's only, say, Russia who's using misinformation or disinformation when it's about their own political or military goals. We are in the midst of a war, coming together with these misinformation and disinformation elements coming from the Ukrainians almost on a daily basis, actually, for the past couple of years. And we have a very strong memory, actually, how that is harming the innate Hungarian minority living in Ukraine. Again, we can live with that. We have almost 1.5 million Hungarians living across the borders around Hungary who used to belong to the old Hungarian kingdom. We can live with that. I mean, history is something actually we've learned to live with. But we have always stood very firm for the rights and living circumstances, the possibilities of those innate Hungarian minorities, which is a primary perspective through which, or prism through which we watch at, we look
Ukraine
at
thinks
the
that
things
Putin's coming for half their country and Hungary might well be coming for a bit of old Hungary.
Yeah, but again, take a look at the military capabilities, the numbers on the ground, and you would all recognize actually that it's impossible actually what propaganda is trying to suggest here, and trying to claim Hungary is taking a standpoint.
So let's just talk about misinformation, which you raised, that's coming from the Ukrainian side. Arguably, there is just as much misinformation coming from your side, supported by your government, about the possibility of Ukraine's accession to the EU and some of the the anti-Ukraine stuff that's coming out. You know, drugs and arms trafficking is the speciality of the Ukrainian mafia. Their mercilessness is notorious worldwide. The war has brought more weapons into their hands than ever before. And so it goes on. Brussels is playing with fire. If Ukraine joins the EU, the Ukrainian mafia will come to Hungary unhindered.
Now, the only difference is that this is not misinformation, but these are hard facts on the ground.
So so the Ukrainian mafia will come to Hungary unhindered if Ukraine joins, and they're all mafia members.
I always wondered, because the geographical and many respects the mental, take it in the right sense, the mental distance between, say, Britain and Hungary, Ukraine, and Hungary and Ukraine is a little bit different. Yeah. So we live next to Ukraine. We've been living next to each other for decades. And I believe we have probably a better knowledge, daily information about what is happening on the other side of the border, how they treat Hungarians, how they treat others, how the Ukrainian state works, what conditions are given actually for even starting accession negotiations.
Trust Ukraine, basically.
No, the thing is, that would be another story, actually, for looking back for the past 1-2 decades, actually. It would be a long story talking about trust, mutual trust.
But the answer is you don't.
Because most of what we have agreed on, and let's again talk about the most important element, and that is minority rights. They never fulfilled what they promised, and they were going against all the European values. So if it starts with that, we can tell you long stories about how linguistic rights, minority educational rights, and so on have been under continuous attack, actually, for the past 2-3 decades by now. So the thing is, coming back to a normal conversation and facts on the ground, we all know that not even one condition is given for the accession of Ukraine. And with all due respect, amidst the war and the uncertainties of when peace is going to come, how the country is going to look like, what we are talking about at the end of the day, how can you honestly suggest that there can be an accelerated process of taking Ukraine to the European Union? I tell you one good example for that. You always blame us that we have a phobia of the Soros empire and network, but we have a good reason for that, actually, how NGOs and the Soros empire came to middling in all kinds of political issues, including enlargement of the European Union and so on. And the younger Soros, just a couple of weeks ago, have visited the commissioner who's responsible for enlargement. And accidentally, maybe not accidentally, at its Instagram post, you see a picture, a billboard, with all the countries and all the almost 3 dozen conditions actually have to fulfill to become member of the European Union. And there is, Serbia, Georgia, all the other states who aspire to become members of the European Union. The last one is Ukraine. All flags are red. All flags are red. So it's not us who are telling that Ukraine is not ready to become a member or start negotiating those chapters actually by which you will become. Enlarging the European Union is a merit-based process for a good reason. Hungary had to wait for more than 10 years actually for that. If you don't fulfill the criteria, it's not only for yourself or bad for your own community and for your own country. It's bad for the European Union. And the war-torn country, hundreds of billions in debt, basically not able to work in a normal way for not only for the past 3 years, but before that, how can you honestly claim that it can be put or brought to the European Union in an accelerated manner within, say, the upcoming 5-6 years?
Can I ask about...
That's impossible. I mean, the Serbians have been waiting for
of course,
for
and as
becoming
you said,
a member.
You waited 10 years.
That's right.
Can I ask about your Hungary's relationship with the EU now? Because the European Parliament, as you know, has accused Hungary of democratic backsliding, of aligning executive, legislative and judicial powers of the state. Your Prime Minister himself called it a system of national cooperation and an illiberal democracy. What is your relationship now with the EU? Because they don't like the way you're behaving. They've threatened Article 7 to remove your voting rights. I'm wondering how comfortable you genuinely are in this body.
Now you see why we are sad that the UK has left the Union, because it is all common sense we are trying to step up for or against when it's some extreme coming from the European Union. As of today, this morning, actually, the Prime Minister has given a speech, which is basically one of the last meetings of the presidency of the Council. We've been giving the second half of last year. It's been the meeting of the presidents of Parliament. And I think very consequentially, he claimed what we are claiming and why we have a conflict with the European Union. I'm going to come back to your precise question, and that is European democracy, how integration is going, what the future of Europe, we believe, we Hungarians, the Slovaks, the Czechs, the French, the Germans, are coming not from Brussels. It is coming from the national parliament, not the government. It is the national parliaments who are the sovereigns of these member states. And it is not a Brussels bureaucracy, the Commission, and not the European Parliament, actually, which is cannot be compared to the national parliaments in any way, which is entitled to say how Europe should look like. And this is the line, this is the principle we have taken right from the very beginning, actually. I mean,
so
even
the
before.
EU as a body doesn't really make sense to you?
No. That's simply not the point. We claim that the EU does make a point and does make sense, especially from the economic perspective, if it's about competitiveness and so on and so on. It's a long story. But certainly we claim that it is the nation states, the member states, who should say which directions the European Union should take. And any other attempt, actually, which is trying to circumvent this, trying to, in a stealth mode, suggest, and this is becoming a bigger and bigger threat and stress, actually, on the member states, especially since COVID, since the energy crisis and the war has came.
I want to just
it is not the Commission who is going to tell you what is going to happen. And that conflict is being translated into these kind of sanctions. We all know it's a witch hunt. It's a witch hunt against those governments, actually, who don't agree.
You think there's an EU witch hunt against Hungary?
That's right.
Okay, because they've accused, not them, actually, the US Treasury Department has talked about public sector corruption in Hungary, which has been worsening for more than a decade.
Yeah, but before you, I'm sorry interrupting you, before you start reading that out, you should all know that section, actually, in the US Treasury Department's report has been written by the previous ambassador to Hungary and supported for them.
So
it is not the new administration which has issued this.
Does that make it invalid?
Doesn't matter, does it?
It does make it invalid because we all know who the previous ambassador to Hungary was.
So you don't listen if an administration from the US calls you corrupt?
Especially not when it was a Democrat who was intertwined with 1,000 ties, actually.
This is the Treasury Department.
With the Soros Empire, and we all know how they call it in the United States the deep state, what the Democrats have set up for the past couple of decades, actually, is
you
working.
think the US Treasury is the deep state?
And not the Treasury, but those who were supplying those lines, actually, for the report. And this is what we see in the European Union. Coming back to your question, why we go against what is happening in Brussels. It is the biggest scandal of our time, the biggest corruption scandal of our time for the past couple of years, maybe decades behind us, is the billions of euros spent on so-called NGOs who are writing expert materials, providing these kind of segments, actually, of reports for the Commission and for European bodies, which are blaming and claiming member states that they are not fulfilling this and that and something. And this is a political agenda which is in a direct clash with the founding fathers' wish about how the European Union should be working and the treaty itself.
You said a moment ago, you talked about how Ukraine wasn't ready to join the European Union and there were all these red flags, and you said absolutely right. If Hungary was trying to join the European Union today, given Brussels where it is, do you think Hungary's accession request would be approved?
If it is, and it should be a merit-based process.
No, I'm not saying it should be, but do you think Hungary's...
If it's not a political...
Given the views on corruption, a free press, all those other things, the rule of law within Hungary that the European Union has of you, would you get approved today?
Well, these call words or buzzwords, whatever we call them, you just mentioned, corruption,
rule
of law and so on.
Buzzwords, corruption,
yeah, but they are.
But
they became. But that's my point. Let me just finish what I think of that. These call words have been hijacked by a bureaucracy which is using them as weapons. So there are no established, or rather a faded, standardized requirement, actually, how that thing is going. So what is the standardized criteria for the rule of law? Would you be able to tell me one element, actually, that is standardized and that is
power
neutral?
Doesn't control it. I mean, that is a key thing. That there are three different branches. The executive power doesn't have control over the judiciary and the rule of law.
That's the first. Hungary is
not
okay.
According to the EU rapporteur, not according to the US Treasury Department.
Yes, but they never say any concrete thing. They always talk about tendencies. They talk about threats, and so this is the name of the game. These call words are being hijacked. They are being weaponized and used against member states. This is completely and clearly against the original sense of the Union and how the treaty is prescribing what should be happening in the European Union. Withholding the money that is due to Hungary.
Because they've sanctioned you, because they don't think you're playing by the rules.
But that's not a sanction, that's a punishment for a different political opinion we have and a different vision of the future of the European Union.
Opinion on free press, an opinion on free judiciary, an opinion on no overreach of executive power.
I was in the midst of the debate with the Barroso Commission back 15 years by now. We have a paper about the media system that is up to the European standards. Still, that's what you hear 15 years after we have a paper from the Commission that the Hungarian media system is up to the European standards, that we, go against the freedom of speech and the freedom of media. But that's nonsense. Again, these are political weaponry, which has been invented actually by liberal ideological circles. You can call it the deep state, whatever you call it. These are not. I believe in Europe it would be completely misleading because NGOs do not belong to the traditional state bureaucracy, though they penetrate and they come and put pressure actually on how decision is being prepared and done in member states and in the European institutions, namely in Brussels, in the Commission and in Parliament. The thing is that fighting that is very difficult because the moment you are, let's put it that way, as they say, ideologically against the mainstream, you become an enemy. This happened in Slovakia. It happened in Hungary. It happened before in Poland. And the most telling example is, right at the moment in Poland there was a change. Within a couple of weeks, without changing anything actually that has been left there, so the legacy of the previous government, changing not one sentence actually in the legal standards, the accepted laws, they became acceptable.
Because Donald Tusk agreed with the rule of law and didn't try and stymie the judges as the party of law and order did.
But if Mr. Orbán says that I agree, that's nothing. If Mr. Tusk says it's okay, without changing the law. Yeah. So that's nonsense, and we can live with that, but it's not good for the European Union. And the point here is that many claim that it is Hungary, the Prime Minister, who should feel bad about these things and think about the future, but it is Europe. Okay. It's the future of Europe actually, which is in danger in that respect, because that is not doing anything good actually for the future of the European integration. Certainly, it is introducing. I mean, this process is bringing in elements of politics and policy making, which is not going to do any good actually for the European Union.
Let's finish by just talking about that whole question of EU integration. Germany, you've probably heard our Prime Minister this morning talking about his views on immigration now. A Labour Prime Minister saying the experiment is over, the lab is closed. This is where I guess your government has been for a long time. Do you see the shift? Do you think that the UK is moving to Hungary's position? Do you think that Europe is moving to that position? What is your sense of where immigration is now?
It's been 10 years since let's put it that way, the peak of the migration crisis. Because Europe is living with a migration crisis not only for the past 10 years, it's been living with a migration issue for the past 3, maybe 4 decades by now. And Hungary has been very outspoken on this issue. Because for us, it's not simply an immigration issue. It's also a culture issue. It's been a culture issue for not decades, but centuries behind us. So we've been at the crossroads of history for quite long.
You want to keep Hungary a white Christian country?
That's one way to formulate it, but I would rather suggest that it is the Hungarians who tell you in what cultural environment they would like to live, whether they would like to have bigger chunks of other populations coming to the country and live with that. And the Hungarians say no, not because they are racist, but because they know the value of that kind of culture we have in Central Europe, because we've been fighting for this not for the past couple of years, but for centuries, generations behind us actually.
So when you hear the language today from Keir Starmer,
but let me come back to this, and we see that the Western European countries have a different attitude towards that. Migration, immigration in the UK, in France, the Netherlands, maybe even in Germany, has been the name of the game for the past generations. It's been an organic process, in many respects probably a must actually, because of for say economic and demography or demography issues. But claiming that this is the only perspective others and all others should be expecting is simply wrong. You have to accept that there's an other logic, and that logic says no. And you have to respect that opinion. So there's no way we will ever accept, actually, that someone is trying to enforce on Hungary and the Hungarians that they should think like the British. And taking a look at, actually, Mr. Starmer's or the German Chancellor's recent steps, actually, and declarations that it should be stopped, But hang on, we've been talking about this for the past 10 years or even more. And everybody had the chance, actually, to have a more rational approach to migration, because...
So Europe is catching up with Hungary?
I don't know if it's... why we indicate, actually, that Hungary should be telling anyone else what the truth is. We can live with the fact, I can accept myself, and the government has been accepting the reality on the ground, that the German economy needs 400,000 to 500,000 new labour force on a yearly basis. But there is a cultural way to this. If you wanted to have a qualified, well-performing, quality material, sorry to say so, coming to your country and contributing to your economic growth, put the discipline on the ground, put the rules on the ground by which it is going to happen, and make people follow that.
So do you think Keir Starmer's right to say what he said today?
It's the British people who should decide about who is right and who is wrong, so it's not the Hungarian government's position. But I can tell you that our historical lesson is a little bit more complicated probably than the British one. And I can tell you that being at the crossroads of history have taught us lots of lessons about how intrusions of a new culture or a different culture, which obviously is going to result in conflicts, larger amount of people coming to your country without following any of the rules is not going to end well. And those lessons should be drawn, and those lessons should be talked about. And we never vindicated again that we are able and would be entitled to tell anyone, actually, not even to our neighbors, what should be followed, but common sense should prevail. And again, the recognition that there is a different logic at least should be accepted.
Zultan Kovage, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for coming in. Thank you so much.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.